Hi there, welcome to our third lesson in chemistry. So in this session we're going to look at the chemistry of the different types of fats, where they come from and why they react as they do in our bodies. So there are four types of fats: saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and of course trans fats. So let's look at each one of those, and we'll start with saturated fats. So saturated fats usually come from animal sources. They're usually solid at room temperature, so things like meat fat, cheese, dairy. So for example, cream has more saturated fat in it than milk, so it makes it a slightly thicker liquid. But there are two plant sources of saturated fats, and that is coconut oil and palm oil. And you'll find out of all of the oils that they tend to be the most solid, so you'll often find in winter especially that they will be solid at room temperature, and this is because of the level of saturated fats that they contain. The chemical structure of saturated fats, they all have single bonds in their carbon chain, and the only difference between them is the length of the carbon chain. So as we discussed in the last video, butter has a very short, mainly contains very short chained fatty acids. Meat fat contains very long ones, and coconut oil and palm oil contain medium length ones, 12, 14 carbons. Now do remember too that any fat doesn't only contain one type of fatty acid, it will contain a variety, and it'll just be that it'll be heavier in some types of fatty acids than others. So the thing about saturated fats, the good thing about saturated fats is they're incredibly stable. By having all these little single bonds and no double bonds, it makes them really stable in heat, light and oxygen. So it means if you're going to cook at high temperatures, you are better with saturated fats. So back in I can remember as a little girl, Mum would save all of the meat fat off a roast and she'd put in a little dish, and they called that dripping, and they would use that for roasting or frying. And looking back, that was actually a very healthy thing to do because those fats are very stable in high temperature. Not saying that we want a lot of them in our diet. We know that they're not great for heart disease, so we want small amounts, but if you're going to cook with them, these are good oils to cook with. And so you might cook in ghee, which is clarified butter, that has more saturated fats in it, or meat fat or coconut oil are good fats to cook in. They are also very straight molecules, so they can pack in really tight together, and this is why they tend to be solid at room temperature. But it's also the reason why for some of us with sensitive skin, or skins that are sensitive to becoming congested and blocked, they can cause a problem because they create a thicker, stickier oil in our sebaceous glands, and that's more likely to block. Now, not everyone has that problem. I'm not a particularly congesting skin, but I work with a lot of people on my team who are highly sensitive to saturated fats. So that's just something to be aware of with your clients. So that's saturated fats. The next one we'll look at is monounsaturated fats. Now mono means one, and unsaturated means there's a double bond. So there's one double bond in monounsaturated fats. So what we would see is this situation where we don't have a hydrogen here and we don't have a hydrogen there, and so therefore it is now unsaturated, but we have our double bond. So common sources of monounsaturated fats, one that you'll probably know really well, it's a particular oil we use a lot in cooking and in dressings and even as a dip. Do you know what that is? It's olive oil. So olive oil is a wonderful source of monounsaturated fats, and monounsaturated fats are wonderful for heart health. So they produce lots of benefits they're good to have in our diet, and you should have them in abundance. The third group of fats is our polyunsaturated fats. Now poly means many, so it contains two or more double bonds. And polyunsaturated fats are common in many vegetable oils. So hemp oil and safflower, sunflower, flaxseed oil, all of those oils contain many polyunsaturated fats, and they're very common fatty acids to find. And the difference with polyunsaturated fats is that, and it's true of monounsaturated as well, is wherever you get a double bond, you get a kink in the molecule. So with monounsaturated fats, you've got one double bond, you get one kink. And you can imagine if something's a bit more kinky, it can't pack in as tight. So it tends to be more liquid. So of course, olive oil is way more liquid than saturated fats like meat fat. But olive oil is even thicker than a lot of your polyunsaturated fat rich oils. So you'll find olive oil is one of your few oils that if you put it in the fridge, it will solidify, whereas most vegetable oils will not. And this is because it only has one little kink in its molecule. Whereas if you have a polyunsaturated fat, for example, and we'll get rid of that little hydrogen and that little hydrogen. Now we have two kinks in the molecule, so he's really kinky and he's going to find it really hard to pack in tight, so he's going to be much more liquid. So of course, polyunsaturated fats are wonderful for our skin because they tend to enable our sebum to flow better. It's very hard for it to block when it has those polyunsaturated fats in it. And then the last type of fats we have are trans fats, and these are bad fats, and they occur when polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fats are processed or heated. And what happens is trans fats are where the double bond, even it should normally be kinky, it straightens out. And so trans fats can act more like saturated fats in our diet because they straighten up and therefore they tend to solidify. So a lot of shortenings and things that you can buy in the supermarket are made, they have a degree of trans fats in them. And this is the one type of fat that we really don't need in our diet. We need to avoid them completely. So please don't be, eating processed foods basically, and takeaways contain them as well. So in summary, saturated fats, very stable in heat, light and oxygen, great to cook with, but we want to limit them in our diet because they're not great for our health. They have their benefits, but they're not 100% great for our health, and they're certainly not great for some people's skins. Monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats are wonderful for our diet as long as they're good quality and not processed. A lot of your sauces that you get in supermarkets are in clear plastic containers. They've been heat pressed to get more yield, and unfortunately these double bonds make them more vulnerable to heat, light and oxygen. So these are delicate oils. You don't want those type of oils. So we want good quality, and if you've got good quality, you can have them in abundance. And the last one is trans fats. You definitely don't want them. They're processed or heated oils that are no longer good for your health. So next session, we're going to look at how essential fatty acids fit into all of this.